Hello and welcome back to Fleetwood Area High School's election coverage for the 2016 presidential election. My name is Tristan Spann. This period we will be focusing on immigration during one of our busiest periods of voting. In all, 8 classes will be voting this period, representing the states of New York, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Virginia, Maryland, New Jersey, and Connecticut. But first, polls have officially closed in Vermont, Massachusetts, Maine, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island. And we have the results for some of those polls now. New Hampshire's election was within margin, triggering an automatic recount. While we wait for the final products to report in, let's start with the states that we can. First, we have Vermont, represented by Mrs. Mankin's first period class. Its 3 electoral votes will be awarded to Hillary, with a final vote of 8-7. Clinton also claims Massachusetts and its 11 electoral votes. Mr. Carr's first period's class voted 7-5, giving the Bay State to Clinton. Moving on, we have Ms. Jarosinski's first period voting for the great state of Maine. Tiger TV is confident in reporting that its 4 electoral votes will go to Clinton by a margin of 3. Mr. Weiss's first period represented New Hampshire and went to Clinton in a landslide victory. Last but not least, we have Rhode Island, represented by our teachers who had first period free. Rhode Island and its 4 electoral votes have been awarded to Clinton. So this period now Bianca Javari is on scene in the library. Tell us Bianca, with 8 classes voting this period, I'm sure things are hectic. But you have been able to learn, what have you been able to learn from currently at the polls?
Okay, 80% of New Hampshire supports Clinton's immigration plan. And the Build a Wall has been a rally cry of the Trump campaign. How realistic do you think the wall is?
I think it's very unrealistic because there's lots of waterways and lots of private-owned property along the Mexican border, and they'd never be able to build over all of it.
All right, well, that wraps up things here. Back to Tristan.
Thanks, Bianca. Moving on to this period's panel discussion. Just to review, each period will be welcoming 2 student experts who've done extensive research on the topic of the period. They are here on a conversation with real issues, and the points that they argue are not necessarily in line with their own political views. So this period, we are addressing the issue of immigration. We're going to take a look at both candidates' views on immigration here. Let's start with Mr. Trump.
Number 1, are you ready? Are you ready? We will build a great wall along the southern border. And Mexico will pay for the wall. On day 1, we will begin working on an impenetrable, physical, tall, powerful, beautiful southern border wall. We will use the best technology, including above and below ground sensors, that's the tunnels. Remember that, above and below. Number 2, we are going to end catch and release. We catch them, oh, go ahead. We catch them, go ahead. Under my administration, anyone who illegally crosses the border will be detained until they are removed out of our country and back to the country from which they came. And they'll be brought great distances. We're not dropping them right across. They learned that. President Eisenhower, they'd drop them right across, and they'd come back and across. Then when they flew them to a long distance, all of a sudden that was the end. We will take them great distances, but we will take them to the country where they came from, okay?
So John, We've heard Trump's proposed border wall plan before, but how realistic is it for such a structure to be built and a foreign government to be forced to pay for it?
Well, Tristan, frankly, I really do think that's a great question. And to answer it, very, very realistic for both the wall to be built and to make Mexico pay for it. First off, the estimated cost of the wall by many of economics say that $8 billion for the wall, and the wall will stretch both above ground and below ground. So it's going to cover pretty much everywhere. It's not going to be penetrable. And is this feasible? Is this estimate feasible of $8 billion? Yes. In 2013, Israel established a border wall between them and Egypt. Now, per mile, $1.8 million to construct. Now, take that and estimate the total cost of the U.S. wall between U.S. and Mexico. That's $3.8 billion for Trump's wall. Now, that's on the low side of that $8 billion, so it might not even cost $8 billion. It probably will cost less. Do we need a wall? Absolutely. Our current trade deficit with Mexico right now is $58 billion. Now, illegals send $24 billion back to Mexico every year. Now, you got to realize that this is not taxed. The government isn't making these people pay income tax. They're not being paid anything because they're not being made to pay anything because this is all they're being paid under the table and they're sending it across the border. Now, the U.S. every year they spend $760 million to educate illegal immigrant children. Now, $4.2 billion total every year for healthcare, housing, education, and welfare for illegal immigrants. We are losing money to Mexico because we have to pay for these illegal immigrants. So we really need this wall. Now, do walls work anymore? Absolutely. Our wall right now is in shambles. It's basically a fence with tears and rips and holes in the wall. So easy to cross through. And now, the border security isn't doing a very good job of stopping these people either. So they have easy access into the United States. It's basically pretty open. Israel's border wall, illegal crossings dropped 99.7% from almost 10,000 to 34 crossings a year. So yes, walls work. It's been shown in Israel. Now, can we afford the wall?
All right, John.
Yes.
Let's give Ripley a chance to respond here.
So, John, you bring up an excellent point. However, I think that the issue is with the system itself rather than the necessity of an actual physical border. The problem is that there is a quota on the amount of visas that are issued to people in Mexico who are able to come to the United States legally every year. And there's also a number issued on the amount of citizenships that are available to those from Mexico every year. So the problem isn't with needing a physical border per se, it's with fixing the system there. And by fixing the system there and increasing that quota, we wouldn't need the wall because more people would be able to come over legally.
People will still cross over the border illegally. Now, can we afford the wall? Yeah, minimal costs. According to CBS, the U.S. government spends $6.85 million every minute, and using Trump's $8 billion estimate, in 20 hours, that cost would be covered. Now, but we won't pay for the wall. Mexico will pay for the wall. Why should they pay? According to the New York Times, Mexico is aiding and abetting illegal immigrants. The government has gone so far as to release pamphlets to illegally instruct immigrants to how to cross over to the border without being detected. Now, this is really hurting our country.
All right, let's take a closer look at Ms. Clinton's views on the subject. Roll clip 2.
I have been for border security for years. I voted for border security in the United States Senate. And my comprehensive immigration reform plan, of course, includes border security. But I want to put our resources where I think they're most needed, getting rid of any violent person, anybody who should be deported, we should deport them. When it comes to the wall that Donald talks about building, he went to Mexico, he had a meeting with the Mexican president, didn't even raise it, he choked, and then got into a Twitter war because the Mexican president said, we're not paying for that wall. So I think we are both a nation of immigrants and we are a nation of laws, and that we can act accordingly. And that's why I'm introducing comprehensive immigration reform within the first 100 days with a path to citizenship.
Now, she never gets anything done, so naturally the wall wasn't built. But Hillary Clinton wanted the wall.
I'd like to hear from Secretary Clinton.
I voted for border security, and there are some limited places where that was appropriate. There also is necessarily going to be new technology and how best to deploy that. But it is clear when you look at what Donald has been proposing. He started his campaign bashing immigrants, calling Mexican immigrants rapists and criminals and drug dealers, that he has a very different view about what we should do to deal with immigrants.
Ripley. Secretary Clinton proposes on what she calls a comprehensive immigration reform. While she has a stance on the issue of immigration, it is not at the forefront of her campaign, unlike Trump's. Do you think Hillary puts enough emphasis on the immigration issue, and will her plans be enough to solve the problem?
That's a great question, Tristan. Thank you. So, I think that Hillary really puts emphasis on other things in her campaign because they're more important and they're more prevalent to the American people. I think that this issue isn't as large as Donald Trump proposes that it is, and it really shouldn't be the forefront of her campaign. However, I do think that the plan that she is proposing with the comprehensive immigration reform is more than enough to make headway on the issue, more headway than Donald Trump would possibly be able to create in his term. By promoting naturalization, she hopes to create a National Office of Immigrant Affairs, which will then be able to help to aid legal immigrants coming to the country and becoming citizens in the proper manner.
John?
All right, well, Hillary's plan, absolutely not. It's not going to do anything. Her plan is to grant citizenship to 11 million plus Mexicans crossing the border over to America. Grant 11 million of these people citizenship. Taxpayers pay for the healthcare and the education of these people. That's going to hurt our economy. The open border policies that she plans will lower wages and make safety make Americans less safe in the country where we're living in a world that's already under a lot of threat. Now, Hillary Clinton even said her dream was completely open borders. That, to me, is just, it's not going to stop anybody from coming through, and it's really going to hurt our economy. Now, more of the same, which is what she proposes, is clearly not working. So her plan isn't going to do anything. Now, how is Trump going to make Mexico pay for the wall? He's going to pressure Mexico into paying for the wall by, first off, threatening to prevent immigrants from sending money across outside U.S. unless they show documentation first. Once they show documentation that they are legal citizens, then they can send money across. Now, second, he wants to increase NAFTA fees, which is a major source of overstays. And by doing this, it will reduce the amount of people that overstay their NAFTA visas and eventually lead to less permanent illegal immigration. Third and final, he wants to increase fees on border crossing cards. 1 million of these are issued every year. They're another major source of overstays. And yet again, this will cut down on the permanent illegal immigration. All this is completely within the boundaries of the Constitution.
All right. Thank you both for your time. I look forward to hearing from from the two of you throughout the rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Tristan.
Thank you, Tristan.
That brings us to our discussion to a close. Let's head back on scene where Mina Isaac is getting an eye on the polling place. Mina?
Thanks, Tristan. I'm here with Markins Griffin from Mr. Weiss's second period government class. Now, Markins, Maine was a 50-50 split on who should pay for the wall. Who do you think should pay for the wall? Should we have a wall?
I think the idea of a wall is a good idea, like when you think about it, but realistically, there's no way we can actually pay for that wall or force Mexico to pay for it because they're not going to pay for something that's going to hurt them. They're not going to be able to get back in the country. So I think it's a good idea, but I don't think it'll work.
Okay, thanks, Markins. We're going to kick it back to Tristan in the studio. Tristan?
Thank you, Mina. That just about wraps up this period's election coverage. Coming up next period, we'll have results from all 8 states voting this period, while voting in Georgia, Alabama, Florida, South Carolina, and Washington, D.C. takes place. We'll also welcome some familiar faces back to the studio to debate the topic of health care. That wraps up our coverage for period 2. I'm Tristan Spaneth. We'll see you in 20.